1.15 to the destination of 190.168.2.1. Here you can see that the server, okay, again forwarded this DHCP offer with broadcast message inside of its network, and then DHCP request, and then DHCP ACK. Okay, as I mentioned before, because of that, now PC1 has IP address. If you want, you can see the IP address of the PC1 192.168.250, and then default gateway. Also, if you want, you can use for example, the command of the IP config/all for all of the information verification. Look at here, the default gateway, the DHCP server, the DNS server, and also the subnet mask, and finally the lease time. Because of that, in the networks that we have DHCP in other subnets, we need to use the feature of the DHCP relay agent. And with one easy command, we can configure it on the interface in the network of the clients. Okay, we should configure on the router IP helper address, then DHCP server IP address, and we can easily take the IP address from the DHCP server. You know that in previous scenario, we used the router as a DHCP relay agent, but router, in addition to acting as a DHCP relay agent, might act as a DHCP client. Specifically, the interfaces of a router might obtain its IP address from a DHCP server. Look at here, for example, in this scenario, we have one router connected to the network, and this is the DHCP server. You can configure easily the interface of router to obtain its IP address from the DHCP. This is the command router config. If then you can configure IP address DHCP. Instead of configuring the IP address, you can obtain the IP address from the DHCP. For example, assume that the router connected to one ISP. In the side of ISP, we have one DHCP server. We can obtain our IP address or the interfaces of router IP address with the DHCP. The process exactly same. Okay, I will show you, but for now, let me to review the process. First, the router should send DHCP discovery. Okay, with this similar function such as the DHCP discovery that we are sending from a PC. After that, the router should receive DHCP offer from the DHCP server. And after that, the router should send again DHCP request to requesting the offer. And after that, finally, it will receive the DHCP acknowledge or DHCP ACK message from the DHCP server. And after that, the router can use this IP address. Because of that, the router, beside of or in addition to the DHCP relay agent, it can work as a DHCP client. You know that for DHCP relay agent, for DHCP client or DHCP server, okay, in router, we need to enable the to ensure that the service of DHCP is enabled on the router, but it is not for example, so important because by default this service is enabled. But if you want, you can enable or disable it with this command service DHCP. The service DHCP by default is enabled. You don't need to enable it, but if the DHCP service as a client, as a DHCP relay agent doesn't work in the router, you can verify that the service of DHCP is enabled on the router. Let me to show you this scenario. I'm going to show you how the router is obtaining its IP address from the DHCP server. Actually, here the router working as a DHCP client. In this scenario, as you can see, we have router 1 connected to the DHCP server. This is the CLI of the router 1. I'm going to obtain IP address from the DHCP server, and also we can capture the link of the, for example, ETH00 in the switch, because I'm going to show you the process of the obtaining of DHCP, the IP address or other configuration from the DHCP server. This is the capture, and this is the CLI of the router. Okay, in the CLI of the router, we need to configure only one command: interface ETH00, then for example IP address DHCP. That's it, IP address DHCP. Look at here, when I'm using this command. Also, you know that we should enable the interface of router also, no shutdown. Now we can see the process. Look at here, this is DHCP discovery, sending from the router, is sending from router, DHCP offer, DHCP request, and DHCP X. So easy, okay? And after that, here you can see that a log is appeared in the console of the router, interface ETH00, assigned DHCP address 192.168.150 with the mask of 255.255.255.0. And here, if you want, you can see the, for example, show IP interface brief. Easily you can find that with the method of DHCP, now we have learned this IP address 192.168.150. Because of that, now in router we acting as the DHCP client, and you know that the service DHCP is enabled by default. Okay, this is the second function of router, the DHCP client. But let me to say that the router can act also as a DHCP server. This means that we can configure DHCP on the router. Let me to talk about the router as a DHCP server a little more. As you can see in this scenario, the router is acting as a DHCP server. Look at here, a router or a multi-layer switch, one MLS, okay, may also act as a DHCP server. You know that until now we have used the router as a DHCP relay agent and also as a DHCP client. Now I'm going to show you that the router can act as a DHCP server. It's so easy. You need to configure the DHCP server on the router one, for example, one pool of the IP addressing and some other useful information. After that, the process exactly is same. I will show you, but let me to emphasize that again, we have the similar process. Now the PC1 as a DHCP client should send DHCP discovery again to the DHCP server. After that, the DHCP server should answer with the DHCP offer, the similar process, okay? And after that, again, the PC1 should request with the DHCP request message. And finally, we will have the DHCP acknowledgement. And with this four-way communication, the PC1 as a DHCP client will have its IP address configuration. So easy. I will show you how we can configure the router as a DHCP server. It is easy. Look at here. In the router, you know that the first thing that should be enabled is the service of DHCP, but the service of DHCP by default is enabled. You don't need to use this command, okay, service DHCP. After that, for example, we need to configure the pool. But before configuring the pool, one useful command is excluded address command. You know that in DHCP topic, maybe for some reasons we don't want to assign some range of IP address, and because of that we can exclude the range of IP address that we don't want to assign to other system with this command IP DHCP excluded address. Then you can, for example, configure the start IP and end IP that you don't want to assign to the system. For example, from 190 to 168, 1 to 190 to 160 to 150, for example, okay? After the configuring the DHCP excluded address, now you need to configure the DHCP pool router config. The command for configuring DHCP pool is the IP DHCP pool, then pool name is this command. After that, you need to configure all of the addressing or information that you need in your network, okay, router in this pool, router DHCP config. After that, here, for example, you can configure the network, which network address you want to assign to the systems. Here you can configure the network ID and also mask. If you want, you can use prefix length. Both of them are correct. After that, again, for example, we can configure other information that we need to give to the systems. For example, default router IP address, default router. Here I'm not going to talk about the, for example, all options of the DHCP. If you want, you can use, for example, question mark to find which commands is available in this mode, but we are reviewing the features, okay? After that, if you want, you can configure other system DNS server, for example. Let me to show you. Here we can configure DNS, then server.